Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Self-Care Sunday podcast.
We are your hosts, Shannon and Kyle. If you haven't met us before, that means you haven't listened to our first two episodes, which are readily available, and you should listen to them. We definitely recommend checking them out to get caught up.
And as a disclaimer before the disclaimer, we have a third co-host with us today. It's my cat. I'm recording from home, so he might pop in here and there, so don't mind him. But as our original disclaimer, this podcast is not intended to be used in the place of therapy. If any activities or information from this podcast elicits strong emotional responses, please seek counseling by reaching out to the Counseling Services Center or your local mental health provider.
Wonderful. And welcome to our episode 3. Today we'll be talking about relationships, which has a lot of depth. So we're going to cover as much as we can about relationships today.
Yes, we have a limited time frame, so we will probably be talking about some things that overlap with our first episode on homesickness and adjustment. So at times, we will refer you back to that episode to save time for new content in our current recording. But today, we will be discussing a variety of relationships that could include friends from home or who went to other colleges, new friendships and branching out, non-platonic relationships and family, and potentially some romantic relationships in there.
Heyo. So I feel like to get started, I know we talked a lot about this when we recorded our adjustment podcast. I feel like so much of making new connections is such a big part of the college experience. You're meeting all kinds of people from all over the place, and sometimes I think it's just hard to settle into that. So if you haven't checked out our adjustment episode, I highly recommend that if you're struggling with some of this as well. But making new connections is so important for us in this experience. I think we grow and learn so much about ourselves by being exposed to people who are different than we've been exposed to before. We get to challenge some of our ideas about the world and challenge some of our own self-confidence to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, see how we do. So I feel like there's some components to this that I'd like to talk about. And I mean, we both have our experiences, so I'm sure we could add some stories here and there. But making new connections can be really grounding. It helps us to connect to the new place that we're in, right? So being on the college campus or being a part of this new community, it can be really helpful to find the people who are going to be supportive in that environment. So sometimes it's good to just put yourself out there to see some new people or try some new activities to maybe encounter some new people. But it can be difficult and scary, especially if you're not sure who you want to be around or if you're confident enough to be in those situations yet. So part of this is kind of checking in with yourself and growing to take on new opportunities. And then a big part of this as well is finding boundaries that can be really helpful with getting acclimated to the new campus and new college experience. Sometimes we have to prioritize friendships. Sometimes we have to prioritize our classwork and academic work. So even balancing that can be difficult. So knowing that you have the opportunity to set some boundaries, to say, all right, this time is dedicated to like making new friends, hanging out with new people. But I also have to make sure that I'm doing the work that I need to make sure I stay here and have opportunities to meet new people. So there's a lot of ways those overlap. I would recommend studying together, maybe checking in with each other on how classes are going, asking other new friends about their classes. Are they taking anything interesting or have any cool professors that they would recommend? So maybe open the door a little bit that way and see where some overlap happens. There's just a great NPR article that will be linked in the description that goes into detail about some of the ways that friendships affect our academic success. And friends that study together stay together is the short summary of that one. But I think when friends also care about their academic goals and what they want to do in their future, friendships can encourage each other to continue to grow and learn and meet those goals. There might be times where some friendships get in the way of that. So is someone asking just to go and party all the time and not paying attention to some of their own goals? And does that affect how you feel? Is it too distracting for your own work? So I think that can be a really important component in this. Find the people who are helping you to meet your own goals and who are supportive of those. And then finally, I got one more research study here. I think, and I don't know, Shannon, if you felt this way, but a lot of incoming students feel like everybody has their established group already. Like they just assume they've met their people. No one's taken new applications to be a part of their friendship group. And it makes it hard sometimes to feel like there are other people out there to become friends with.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. I definitely remember feeling that way my first year at school.
mhm, yeah,
Pretty common.
definitely. I mean, I hear from students all the time. It's just like, well, they already know who they like. So why would I be invited to their group? So the research study that I found was done in Vancouver, Canada, where they surveyed 1,099 freshmen, and 48% of those students assumed that other freshmen had closer friends than they did, which I think is a huge number. If you have
Yeah.
half the incoming class assuming that everybody has good friendships established, that makes it really intimidating to try and reach out to someone new. So know that you're not alone in that feeling, and that most likely the people you see as having good friendships are also questioning if other people need friends.
Yeah, and definitely, that saying, "You're not alone," is pretty cliche, but it's very true. You're not alone, and the sooner you really start to think about it, the more you'll find evidence that you're not alone. So hold on to that.
Hmm.
And kind of related to what you were talking about with the NPR article, I am actually reading this book called Conduct and Community because I'm a residence life and housing professional. So something that we're doing is working through parts of this book. And the book also mentions that community within the residence hall and connections um, do affect positively student success in college. So it's not
Hmm.
just that one article, it's
Hmm.
everywhere.
Hmm. Awesome.
So, in terms of making new connections, of course, that means that you're going to lose some old connections. Distance and change can alter relationships in our lives. So, how do we deal with the grief and the change that comes with moving and doing something totally different? Growing apart is natural, but that really doesn't make it any easier. I definitely grew apart from a lot of my friends when I came up here, and that's okay because, I wish them well now. I haven't spoken to a lot of them in many years, but I still have friends from my childhood, so it's kind of a mixture of both. I think there's always um, just this weird feeling of like, is it because of me? Like maybe you're ascribing the loss of the relationship to you somehow, but it takes two to have a relationship in the first place. So it takes two to end a relationship. And I will die on that hill. I absolutely will. So I know it can be really difficult to think like maybe it's something I did, maybe I could have done this differently. And like, yeah, sure, maybe there are some things you could have done differently, but why does thinking about that now and making yourself feel upset help you? Like, how does that help you? Oh, it doesn't? Whoa, that's crazy.
Surprise, surprise.
Guess what? So, when I think of old relationships that have um, I've grown apart from those people, I just try to appreciate the good times and the lessons that I learned by separating from those people. So sometimes it was in my best interest to separate from others, and that's okay. Um, I always just try to wish people well and appreciate the good times because then I don't really feel any sort of bitterness or unfinished business with that relationship. And it definitely helps me come to terms with the separation. Um, and so obviously losing something, losing means loss. So loss and grief really tie in here. So you could journal through the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You might experience some or all of those, or maybe one or two. But definitely try to just write about it, get it out somehow. If you like to make music, maybe make a song. Just use some creative outlets to get those feelings out of your body and into something that's creative.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that can be really important because it is it is sometimes hard to have to separate from people that we've known for a long time, or I mean, who have gotten us to the place that we are at. And I don't think it's a negative thing if we do have to maybe leave someone behind or go in a different direction or just part ways. Um, because I do think that's like natural in life. And it makes it really tough when we're entering into this new situation where we have some maybe the roots of something starting, but we don't feel like we're established in a new friendships. And also we're trying to move on from other relationships that just might not be as helpful or available to us anymore. So being caught in between those things can be really difficult. Really like what you said though. I like there's so much of the support that we get early on in life sometimes just doesn't meet the new needs of who we've become or who we're growing into. I saw a wonderful TikTok the other day, actually, where someone kind of came to the realization that, like, them feeling more disconnected from the people who have been in their comfort zone, who have been around them for so long, was a literal representation of them outgrowing those supports, being able to move on from them because there's new needs and new direction. And I think that can be really helpful for people who sometimes settle in their relationships, right? Like you have some friends and they've been there for comfort, but they're not the nicest to you. They're not the most supportive to you. It's just availability, convenience. And sometimes it's good to recognize, like, all right, those are the relationships I can let go of because now I know that someone else really does care and they're here for me and support some of the decisions I've made in a new way. I definitely experienced that in my own transition to college where just some of the friendships I didn't have the same interests anymore. It was it was something that I had accepted more about myself, and then I could find people who kind of met those needs or interests or commonalities, where some of the friends I had in high school, we didn't really have that much in common when I really sat down and thought about it. So it's good during those times, though, to know that a transition is happening. It can be really tough because you feel pulled in both directions. You're trying to kind of keep up who you are at home or who you are with those people and become this new person. It's very tough. Sometimes it's very disorienting because we're trying to figure out who we are. So just know in those circumstances, it's important to kind of keep some kind of level of foundation of support. So is there someone who knows you and will be there even as you are learning and growing? For some people, that's friends. For some people, that's family. For some people, that's having just like support otherwise. Maybe it's a counselor that you've been working with and they help you through the transition. That's okay too. Some of those temporary supports can be really helpful. So just know that those do take a toll on you, especially when you're navigating the distance, right? Like being far away from home and in this whole new space can be really hard if you're not able to get home so easily, or especially during COVID and having more pressure in that way.
Mm.
But just know that you are kind of looking for quality of your relationships. Don't get consumed with like having a certain number of friends, but who can be a good supportive person in your life. So I think that'll help you through that transition. And I know there's a lot of worry about being liked. The idea of rejection, not so great. I feel like I definitely remember those initial friendships where you're like, yeah, this person seems cool, but do they think I'm cool? if I asked them to hang out, would they want to hang out with me? And kind of like second guessing that stuff. There's so much room for like miscommunication, especially entering into new friendships, because all it takes is someone just like rolling their eyes in a certain way or like shrugging off something or not responding to a text in a certain amount of time. And sometimes it's easy for us to read like, oh, they don't like me, they hate me, they don't want me around. When really they could have a lot going on. It could be a really busy day. That could just be who they are. So even allowing yourself some patience and grace, openness to those experiences to let people have the benefit of the doubt, I think can be really helpful. Don't get too consumed in the minute details because I think that we get lost in that very easily.
Yeah, and then we have a tendency to just read into things way too much, and it spirals and becomes something that it just wasn't at all.
Yep.
So, definitely save your mental energy here when potentially reading into something. I always try to take people's actions and words at face value, and if they're consistently congruent over or incongruent over time, then you could read into it. But, it's easy to have those misunderstandings like Kyle said, so just hang in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then probably my least favorite part, experience, I guess, about college is transitioning back home after I've been away at school. And this is even still hard as like a real adult, going home after being away for a while is tough. Especially, I guess it depends on your family dynamic, but I don't know. In my opinion, I always feel like family, and the family systems that you grew up in, just they start to replay when you get back there, and you might start to play some of those old roles that you were previously assigned when you lived at home. So it can be really tough to go back home and re-enter that family system after seeking a sense of autonomy and adulthood at school. So this is why it's really important to not only make those new connections and do some self exploration, but really work on your relationship with yourself because, as Kyle was saying before, it's really helpful to have those constant supports or just those supports that help you through transitions. And we are our own worst critics, but could you imagine if we are our own biggest supports? Like, if
Mhm,
we were our biggest cheerleaders, I feel
mhm,
like everyone's life would be drastically different.
mhm, mhm. I mean, that's so telling too, like how that isn't the case, right? Like that tells us so much about some of the messages we get in our society or our experiences. We give a lot of credit to the critic, but we find it really difficult to just offer genuine support to ourselves. Mm, it's kind of amazing when you said it that way. I'm like, oh yeah, why don't we do that? That would be
Yeah.
great.
There's this thing I'd like to share. It's a Buddhist metaphor. It's called the second arrow, and this can help you be nicer to yourself. My friend shared this with me a few days ago, and I was like, "Oh, perfect for the podcast." So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll link the article in the description. But basically, the second arrow. Um, the shitty thing that happens in your life, the event or situation, makes you feel bad, and that is your first arrow. That's the triggering event, the reason why you feel bad or unsettled, upset, etc. So, as humans, we have a tendency to very quickly hunt for reasons as to why this shitty thing occurred. And then, more often than not, we tend to turn the blame on ourselves. So, we might think there's something wrong with me. It's my fault. This is kind of what I was alluding to earlier when I was discussing that loss of relationships and the fact that it takes two. The self blame that we often engage in, turning inwards against yourself, is the second arrow. So, the parable of the second arrow is as follows. The Buddha asked a student, if a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? The student replied, it is. The Buddha then asked, if the person is struck by a second arrow, is that even more painful? And the student replied again, it is. The Buddha then explained, in life, we cannot always control the first arrow. However, the second arrow is our reaction to the first, and with this second arrow comes the possibility of choice. So
Mm.
I really like that. I was so grateful that she shared that with me because I even have a problem with that self blame and all of that. So
Mm.
be your
Mhm.
own biggest cheerleader and make that second arrow have a pillow at the end.
I like it. Oh, that's a really important piece in this too. Because it makes me think of how many times, I mean, myself or I've heard from other people of kind of like assuming the worst in the situation. So if someone
Mhm,
doesn't return a text immediately and
mhm.
thinking, oh, maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I presented myself in a terrible way, or and looking inward to find the sense of blame, even when there's no other clue that any blame is really needed. Maybe it is just someone who broke their phone and they can't respond to your text. But
Yeah,
like allowing yourself kind of the opportunity to not be the critic and maybe soften the blow by saying like, yeah, I can support myself through this. Mhm. I like it. I
yeah.
like it.
I really like this metaphor, and I'm definitely gonna be using it with everyone.
That's a good one.
So, shifting gears a little bit, um, we've come up with some ways to try to make those connections or those interactions with new people a little bit easier. And by me saying we've come up with them, we didn't make them up. These are just really tried and true things that we do, like commenting on a shared interest. That's why it's really important to pay attention during those really cringy icebreaker activities that you experience in almost any setting. um, they are cringy, they feel lame, but they do help build bridges.
Very
Sometimes it can
true.
be really difficult to get that conversation going. So it's pretty easy to comment on shared interests or shared confusion even. So in class, if you have a classmate um, that seems friendly or gives off that vibe that you're picking up on, maybe you can talk about confusing course material or dissatisfaction with a professor or, the opposite. If you both like the course, maybe that would be great.
Mm. Oh man, that shared confusion came in so helpful in so many classes. I think there are those opportunities in class where you're like, what is what is the teacher talking about? Does anybody else understand? And if you assume that everybody else gets it, then you feel isolated. But why not just be like, what the hell does that mean to someone else? You get to share in kind of those moments together where you're like, oh, maybe they also are in that state of confusion about what's supposed to be done or what's expected. Um, but I think people generally like asking or answering questions as well. It helps us to feel helpful. So maybe give someone the opportunity to help you out. I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So another part of this, and I think this is the toughest one. So being vulnerable is really, really rough. Right. So like if you are listening to this and you are feeling like, yeah, it's really hard to open up to people because I don't know how they feel about me. Um, that can be a really confusing state of emotions. And it makes sense for us to be protective, right? Like we're scared of how someone might react. So we don't say anything. We keep it to ourselves. We just assume that we're the ones struggling and everybody else is great. But in reality, being vulnerable allows for us to share our actual experiences and maybe find someone else who can relate to that. So imagine you share something like, I feel like I've had a hard time making friends in college with somebody else. the opening is there for someone else to say, yeah, it's been really tough. Like, I don't know who to talk to, or I haven't found someone to trust. But if you don't create that opening by being vulnerable, maybe someone else is sitting there like, well, I can't say what I feel, so I'm just going to keep it to myself. And then if you have two people in the same kind of feeling and no one opens the door, no connection can be made. So even though two people are struggling with the same predicament, it's hard to make friends. If someone doesn't say it, then you can't come together to agree on it. And I think that is rough. We don't really like being vulnerable. We like to be protected and confident and come off well, like we have it all together. But I think it's okay to accept some struggles and to know that other people are also going through that. So if you open the door, you're also making it kind of a new opportunity for someone else to acknowledge what they feel and feel connected to someone else. There's a lot of relief that comes from that.
Yeah, and you might even open the door to a room full of people. So maybe you don't really have that many friends, but you open the door and that other person does have a decent amount of friends and they invite you to their group or they introduce you to more people.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even have to have the same predicament to open
That's
that
very true.
door.
Yeah, that's very true.
So I guess ultimately you never know if you try. If you don't try. That's what I mean. Words are hard for me today. Sorry, folks. Um, but if you're up to date on pop culture in the field of psychology, you'll know that a lot of people are drinking the Brene Brown Kool-Aid. Um, Kyle and myself included. She
Sip,
has
sip.
some she has some really awesome work. I'm gonna chug. Um, on bravery and vulnerability. I definitely suggest you check it out. I'll link some books in the description. There's at least one Netflix special, many TED Talks. She's great. This is not sponsored. If Renee ever hears this, which I doubt she will, but maybe you never know. Hi, thank you so much. I love you. But definitely look into the connection between vulnerability and bravery because I think as a society we see vulnerability as weakness, but it's really not. It's really brave to say, I'm having trouble making friends. It's really brave to admit your hardships and your faults.
Mm. Oh, yes. I feel like that's such an important reframe because I think like our culture hasn't done the greatest job of being accepting of some of the harder feelings and communicating them. So the bravery is if the expectation is people keep things to themselves, but you are willing to share what you're going through with someone else. That is such an act of bravery because it isn't commonplace as much as we're kind of hoping it goes in that direction. But right now, it's truly a brave act to share what you honestly, genuinely feel and think about something, regardless of how someone might respond to that. So, if you book nerds are looking for a book, I highly recommend The Gift of Imperfection. And if you're a people pleaser or a perfectionist or someone who struggles being vulnerable, that's a great book to start with as well. Brene Brown. So, yeah, any of her TED Talks, any
Yeah,
clips.
all of
Yeah,
them.
go through all of them. Just watch them all.
One of us.
Yeah, I think the work has been really powerful to read through and kind of try out because I think as someone who probably struggled a lot more with that earlier on in life, I think it's so freeing to be more of who you are with people because you don't have the same sense of pressure. So
Yeah.
that stuff is really, really helpful.
It's really great to live life with fewer restrictions on your just being as a whole.
Mm.
And something that I thought of when you were talking about that reframe of vulnerability and keeping things hidden, this is seen throughout society in general. You know, often men are told to not cry and keep their emotions hidden. Um, you know, things just bad things that happen to us are we're told to keep them hidden because no one will believe us, and it's just really tough out here. So
Mhm.
let's try to work together collectively to reframe the just hiding everything. We don't need to hide everything. We need to be authentic.
Yep, without a doubt. I mean, that kind of leads into the next piece of this, which is some of the positive coping mechanisms that we have for you to try out. But I think when we do that, when we share our story honestly, we find who actually matters to us, because their response to that situation kind of helps us to see who they are as well. Are they able to listen to my story, my experiences, and be okay with what I'm feeling? Or are they someone who turns their back, who is minimizing it, who's invalidating it? I think that really shows us who our circle can be. So, in part, knowing who matters helps you to feel more grounded. And like I said, those can come from different places. It might be people in your past who have been there throughout, it might be family members, it might be new people who have offered to be a good ear, who are more empathetic or more understanding. But just know who those people are so that when you are feeling isolated or more disconnected from others, you have those people to kind of fall back on. So I think that really is important for that transition point as well. And then obviously just making new opportunities for yourself. So are there places where you can stumble into some new people? I know we've talked about this with adjustment, but joining a club or a group on campus, an organization on campus, attending some of the meetings, even if they're virtually for the time being, maybe that gives you an opportunity to encounter someone that you wouldn't necessarily run into. Class projects are a good place because you're you're forced to do something together. Maybe you can meet someone who gets it, who understands, who's helpful in those projects. Um, and then I'm a little biased here. I worked a job when I was on campus, but I met most of my really good friends that way. We shared a common experience of having a job and working the same shifts and knowing the same challenges and just kind of making up stuff as we're sitting at work. I think it gives you a lot of common experience and common ground to start the conversation, build some friendships that way.
Absolutely. Especially with people who you work with, you do spend a lot of time with them. So I've met a lot of my really close friends at school
Mm.
through my positions in res life so far. Um, don't knock it till you try it.
Mhm.
And as we also discussed in episode 1, we find ourselves becoming friends with people whose values don't necessarily align with ours. Maybe you don't even really like some of the people that you become friends with, but you're more afraid of being alone than you are of having friends you don't like. So all we can really say is just stay true to yourself. You know what you want, and if you don't know what you want, you're discovering what you want. So if you really just feel like, ooh, this group of people, like, they're fine, but, like, I don't always feel myself when I'm with them, follow that gut feeling. It's really important to get to know yourself and be comfortable with who you are so that you form relationships with people who are meant to be in your life. And, I mean, Kyle and I do the narrative therapy stuff, so we're definitely adamant about rewriting your story, reclaiming your narrative. You are in control of your reality, which is why it's so important to give that second arrow a pillow on the end and to just really just stay true to yourself and know what it is that you want. And sometimes society's expectations of us really cloud our judgment in that. So maybe separate like what is mine and what is given to me by my upbringing or my environment.
Mhm.
Just know who you are.
Yep, that's right.
And that's on
Yeah.
that.
I agree. I mean, I think there's so much, as you were saying that, it made me think a lot of people in those transition moments, they kind of become like shapeshifters because they're trying to fit in So they maybe take on interests or personality traits of the people that they've met, but they don't really feel connected to. They're just trying to like find some like common shared ground. So the shape shifting part creates like this mirage of who you are for outside people to look at. And that will attract certain people because you're presenting in that way. So
Mm.
sometimes that leads to people that we wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with or want to get close to. But what they see is what they're attracted to, which doesn't align with who you are underneath the people pleasing mirage. So the more vulnerable and honest you are with who you are, what your interests are, what your values are, the more likely you're going to be to attract people who value that. Because the people who will want to have the conversations you want to have, who want to be a part of maybe the same goals or direction, will be attracted to the fact that you are upfront and honest about that. And I think that that's so crucial because it's so easy to slip into like people pleasing, shape shifting when we feel alone. We just want to fit in somewhere, so we're willing to sacrifice parts of who we are to do that. So
As
maybe think.
you were talking about the shape shifting, that made me think of that like child's toy that's like got all the different shapes that you put into the corresponding like shaped
Yeah, yeah.
hole. So yeah, if you know that you're a triangle, but on the outside you're presenting as a circle, then you're gonna fit into the circle, but inside you're still a triangle. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't really
Mm-hmm.
connect or feel like you belong because you don't. You're a
Yep.
triangle.
Yep. You're a triangle. Gotta
You
accept
are
being
a
a triangle.
triangle.
I love it. I love it. We all have to be the triangle we were made to be. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I mean, we're kind of talking through this so much. I feel like I can relate to this situation because early on in college, I had those experiences of, well, this person seems cool. I'll just hang out with them and talk about things that I don't really care about. But the more that kind of freed up, I think I found more people who were willing to, I don't know, share the same interests or values. So it's kind of amazing when that happens, though. It does take a little bit of patience and acceptance, like self acceptance. That's important here. But so the next part of this goes into our do and do nots. This is a portion where we try and give you some ideas on things to try out and things to let go of that might not be so helpful. So first off, I'll recommend don't cut all ties with your close supports. A lot of people, when they come to college, they might be leaving some really important supports that's just really hard to keep track of because they're more distant or they're living different lives. Um, but when you lose that, sometimes it's really easy to feel very isolated or more vulnerable. Um, and then at the same time, you don't want to just stay connected to those supports from home as well. So, giving yourself the opportunity to stay connected to some and have moments where you're able to connect and get support, but also open yourself up to this new experience, to making new friends, to building like this new support network in this new environment. So make sure that you're kind of balancing that. Connect with the people who have been there for you, who know you when you need to, but also allow yourself to try and be vulnerable. Maybe get to know someone new. Do give new people a chance. This one's a tough one sometimes when we're unsure, feeling very insecure. I can go back to that day as well when I was feeling very insecure and it was hard to maybe open up to someone new. But maybe this new person has something to offer that you can't even imagine yet. And then do not settle for friends who are not supportive or toxic. There are a lot of people out there. So if you are feeling like, all right, I've met this new person, but they kind of don't treat me great, or they're really minimizing or invalidating, or they don't really show me that they care in any way, don't feel like you have to settle for those kind of relationships and connections. because there are a lot of people out there who will offer empathy and compassion and understanding in different ways. So allow yourself to accept and understand some of the warning signs in your friendships. If those red flags are starting up, maybe it's time to just open up a new opportunity for yourself. And then do listen to your gut feeling. The guts tell us a lot sometimes. So if we
They
are feeling
definitely.
like this is bad, get out of here. Maybe it's a good thing to listen to.
Yes. Um, all right. Also, there's some more. Do not try to rush yourself into a relationship, whether that be a romantic relationship, a friendship. Sometimes we think we need to be in relationships because society tells us that we're old enough. Maybe we're old enough chronologically, but not necessarily mature enough or ready to have that kind of connection with someone. And relationships are tough because college is a crucial state in your development as just an individual human being. So if you pair that state of development with, sorry, my Bambino's trying to get me. He's been pretty quiet this whole episode, but
Hey,
now he's like ready to play.
needs the attention.
Yeah. As I was saying, sir, um, I even lost my train of thought. So maybe we're not ready yet and we're just developing and becoming ourselves finally. But then if you add developing with someone else to that, it can be really tough to actually find who we are, and we might get lost in what our partner is doing, if that makes sense. Um, and then just do work on yourself. Being you is the best thing you can do if you're interested in forming a romantic relationship, because ultimately you'd like to find someone who loves you for you.
Yep. And that does take knowing who you are. Sometimes it's good to do that reflective work, figure that out.
All right. So here's some more little interventions and quotes that we have for you. The first intervention I learned from one of my professors in grad school, and I started using that with clients immediately. um, there is a holiday family bingo. So this is again talking about that transition from being away at school to going home. Um, Hopefully people are being safe this holiday season, but let's just talk about this as if we are talking about a normal, regular old Thanksgiving dinner. So maybe there are some family members who purposefully say triggering things to you, or purposefully do triggering things, or maybe even it's not super purposeful, but they know it bothers you. So all of those occurrences that happen at those holiday dinners that really just put you in a bad spot in terms of mood or mentality, will provide a, I mean, you could also look up just a blank bingo board, but I can put a link in the description of the one that I use with clients. But you write in your own bingo spots. So I'm trying to think of some examples, but I can't really think of them off the top of my head. So, just examples of things that people say at Thanksgiving dinner or do, or it could be, your holiday, maybe Hanukkah gathering, Christmas, whatever, any family gathering. Give it a bingo space, and then whenever that happens, check it off. And you can do this by yourself. You can do this with some of your siblings, cousins, anyone who would want to play as well. People
Mhm.
like that are in your support system that are on your side that also get annoyed by these things, and then try to get bingo, make a game out of it. It's really helpful. It's actually really fun
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it makes a, an annoying experience something that you can make light of.
Mhm. The one that came immediately, and this I wouldn't say as my direct family members, but like friends of family who have attended gatherings. The first one that came to mind was like, so and so will say that my career path won't make me any money. Like those kind of things. So will
Yeah,
someone comment that you haven't had enough to eat? Or will someone comment that what you're doing doesn't matter? Those kind of things. So if you
yeah,
can anticipate and expect it to happen, I think we can add a little bit of humor to it. It doesn't
yeah.
feel so hurtful. I
Will
like it.
someone criticize your major? Will someone
Yes.
ask you if you're in a relationship? Maybe you're
Um,
not out yet, and your family member asks you why you don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend yet, and you're not gonna have one because that's
yep.
not who you are.
Yep. I will be compared to someone else in my family.
Mhm.
All of those lovely things that happen.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Activity number 2 involves letter writing. So Shannon and I think have been pretty upfront about our love for writing and how helpful that
Mm.
can be. Um, so sometimes we can't always say the thing that we feel like we need to say to someone else, or we're really struggling to find the confidence to do it. Um, Writing the letter to the person, even if you don't say it or send it, even if you don't give it to them, it just helps you to get it out somewhere and have it down. It allows you to edit it, to pick out the parts that you want to be able to say, and it allows you to kind of get out some of the things that might get in the way of it being good communication. Because I'm sure you can imagine in these situations when you're angry or upset, sometimes you say things that are hurtful, maybe that you don't entirely mean. So if we can get those out of the picture, I think we become better communicators and kind of get to the point of what we're trying to say. I think that can be a good way to give ourselves the space to sort through it. And then especially while we're distance, maybe you're heading home and you don't have the opportunity to stay connected with some of the new friends that you've made. Maybe just do something playful like writing actual letters to them, like old school snail mail. um,
Yeah.
I feel like we don't do that so much anymore. And it's a nice way to stay connected. We have the convenience of texting and we can get annoyed when people don't text us back quick enough or whatever. But sometimes it's really nice to just get like a physical letter in the mail that someone took the time to handwrite and send. I don't know. It shows like a nice level of caring, and it might be a fun way to stay connected. I know Shannon, you ran a pen pal program on campus this semester
I
to help
did.
encourage people to do that.
Yes, I definitely want to pick it up again next semester. Of course, this semester, the spike in COVID cases happened. We went into remote learning, so we had to stick with email.
Yeah.
But I'm really hoping in the future I can do another one where we can have physical letters because it is
Mhm.
really nice and it just shows another level of thoughtfulness
Mhm.
and appreciation.
Definitely. Throw some stickers on it, little doodles.
Get some dried flowers, make it pretty.
Ooh, nice. I
Wax
like it.
seal.
Oh, wax seal ties it all together.
Absolutely. I just got one recently. I love it. But
That's
all
awesome.
right, I digress. And then, all right, so my quote for this episode is be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. I think throughout this episode, I've made it very clear that I think you need to find yourself, be true to yourself, care for yourself, love yourself. Please do that.
Mm,
It's easier said than done. So let's get a move on, folks. um,
that's right.
if you find yourself, then the more you find yourself, the more you find your people. The more you find your people, the
Mhm,
more you find yourself. It's a constant cycle of giving and receiving, taking, all of that stuff. Um, and then if a romantic relationship is a goal of yours or something you want to engage in, the more you find yourself, the more likely it is that you'll find your person.
mhm, mhm. I like it. Yes, I think we've done a good job of emphasizing find yourself, accept yourself. I like it. So for this episode, I picked the quote, and I'm a huge Parks and Recreation fan.
Mhm.
Um, this one's by Ron Swanson. Friends, 1 to 3 is sufficient. think that speaks volumes. Hey, I think it's hysterical because it's such a Ron Swanson thing to say.
Absolutely.
But I also love the message here because if we take away the pressure to have so many friends or to find all of these new people, which sometimes is like just so draining to keep up with, if we are able to just say, if I have 1 to 3 really close, good connections with people, I'll be okay. Because I really do think quality matters over quantity when it comes to support and friendships. And if it's just a couple people that you can hang out with on a regular basis, that's a wonderful place to be. So,
Absolutely.
mhm. So that is our episode.
I'm so surprised that Bambino did not make more of an appearance because he did try to play at that last part, but he didn't meow. He stayed away for the most part because he knows I'm busy. What a good guy.
Wow, wow. I know. I was kind of sad. I was waiting for more meows, but I guess that makes it easier for you.
Uh,
Well, that's our episode on relationships. I hope it was super wonderful and you learned some things to try out, maybe support yourselves a little bit, and catch our final episode of the semester next time, which will be
Aw.
focused on studying and finals.
Dun,
Taking
dun,
care of
dun.
yourself during all of that.
Very important. Stay
Mhm.
tuned.
Yes, stay tuned and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.